Donald Trump reveals shocking origins of Black Americans. What if everything you thought you knew about the origins of Black Americans was a lie? What if the polished stories in textbooks, the lessons repeated by teachers, and the solemn tones of documentaries were not crafted to reveal truth, but to conceal it? Picture this: a stage, a single microphone, and Donald Trump walking forward, not with the polished script of Washington speechwriters, not with carefully bound notes, but with that familiar defiance burning in his eyes. He pauses, lets silence tighten the air, then lets the papers fall from his hand like discarded illusions. Leaning into the microphone, he delivers a whisper that cuts sharper than any shout. They never wanted you to know this. They've hidden it for centuries. But tonight, I'm going to reveal the real origins of Black Americans. The air grows heavy, almost electric. A murmur ripples through the crowd like a wave gathering strength before breaking against the shore. Some laugh nervously, others lean in closer, their faces suspended between disbelief and anticipation. This is not the version of history you memorized in classrooms, nor the narrative repeated by newscasters with practiced voices. This, Trump insists, is the truth that was buried, intentionally, strategically, mercilessly. And in his telling, it is not merely a history lesson, it is a revelation about power, memory, and the destiny of America itself. If you feel the weight of this truth pressing on you now, don't let it pass in silence. Subscribe, share your thoughts in the comments, and join the conversation. The story they tried to bury deserves to be heard. Trump explodes the history books. What schools never told you about Black Americans? The lights dim, the room grows silent, and the crowd waits. Donald Trump steps forward, his stride heavy with purpose, his face glowing under the stage lights, as though he is not simply a man, but a messenger. He pauses at the podium, holding a neat stack of notes. Then with a sudden gesture, he lets them fall to the ground. Papers scatter like fallen leaves. The audience gasps, sensing that what is about to be spoken is not scripted, not polished, but raw and dangerous. Trump leans forward, grips the microphone with both hands, and delivers the opening shot. They've lied to you from the very beginning. You know it, I know it, everybody knows it. The words strike like lightning. He lets the silence hang for a moment, then continues with a voice at once accusatory and prophetic. They told you history was written by the winners, right? Well, in America, history was written by the manipulators, the controllers, the ones who didn't want you to see the full picture. And the origins of Black Americans? They cut it down to one chapter. They reduced it to one word: slavery. But that's not the whole story. That's not even close. That's the part they wanted you to believe, so they could control the future. The crowd stirs uneasily. Trump raises his hands, palms open as though presenting invisible evidence to the room. He paces the stage, pausing with each phrase, each word hammered into the air like nails into a coffin. You see, schools never told you the real history. They never told you that Black Americans, before they were chained, before they were brought here against their will, had kingdoms, power, influence. They had civilizations so advanced that Europe trembled when it heard their names. They had leaders with wealth greater than anything America had ever seen. But what did they do? They erased it. They erased it from the textbooks. They didn't want young Black children to grow up proud of their ancestors. They wanted them to grow up broken, doubting, chained by shame, even after the chains of iron were gone. He pauses, lowers his voice, and with an almost philosophical weight declares, "Why? Because if you control the story, you control the people." And that's what they did. That's what they're still doing. The audience shifts in their seats, the tension thick like storm clouds before thunder. Trump's words are not just an alternative narrative. They are an indictment. He has cast schools, politicians, and media not as guardians of knowledge, but as architects of deception. History books, he says, pacing again, were never history books. They were instruction manuals. Manuals on how to keep people in their place. Manuals on how to make sure America forgot the truth about the people who helped build it. His hand slams down on the podium for emphasis, and the room seems to tremble. They turned history into a weapon. And guess who they used it against? Not just Black Americans, but all of us. Because when you lie about one people's origins, you lie about the nation's foundation. And when you lie about the foundation, the whole house is built on sand. The crowd murmurs, some nodding, others whispering in disbelief. Trump leans forward again, almost whispering, drawing them back into his orbit. They wanted you to believe the story was simple. Africa there, America here, ships across the ocean. But it wasn't simple. It was deliberate. It was planned. It was engineered by the elites, by the powerful who always pretend to save you while they save themselves. His voice sharpens, turning into accusation. There were deals, understandings, handshakes across oceans. It wasn't just trade, it was power. It was strategy. And those strategies were designed to make sure Black Americans never stood on equal ground. They told you it was random. They told you it was tragedy. But I'm telling you, it was strategy. And strategy is always about control. The imagery grows larger, more philosophical now. America's foundation is not separate from Africa. It's entangled. The wealth that built the cities, the industries, the towers that scraped the sky, it wasn't born here. It was imported. It was extracted. It was stolen. And to admit that would mean tearing down the whole myth of America's innocence. He stops pacing. The room is so quiet that the sound of his breathing fills the silence. He grips the microphone tighter and lowers his voice. They wanted you to think Black Americans began in chains. That was the starting point, right? That's the first page in the book. But I'm telling you now, it's not true. They were more, so much more. They were builders, creators, warriors, thinkers, philosophers. They weren't just property. They weren't just slaves. They were people with legacies, and those legacies were stolen. His eyes sweep across the room. They erased the music, the art, the sciences, the systems of government. They stripped away the crowns and left only the chains. And they did it so Black Americans would never rise, so they would never believe they could rise. Because the greatest power you can steal from a man is not his labor, not his land. It's his memory. He points out into the crowd, his fingers shaking with conviction. And that's what they did. They stole the memory. They stole the origin. And when you steal the origin, you steal the future. The words hang heavy. The audience is trapped between disbelief and awe, as though caught in a dream where truth and fiction blur. Trump's tone shifts again, swelling with the rhythm of a preacher on Sunday morning. And so I tell you this, America cannot run from its past. You cannot build a nation on lies and expect it to stand. You cannot erase the origins of millions of your people and expect unity. You cannot silence history and expect freedom. If Black Americans don't know their true origins, if America refuses to face it, then we are doomed to repeat the cycle, over and over, century after century. He raises his voice now, thunderous and final. But if we face it, if we acknowledge it, then maybe, just maybe, we have a chance. A chance to build a country not on secrets, not on manipulation, but on truth. Because the truth always rises. You can bury it for a year, for a century, for 1,000 years, but the truth always rises. And the truth is this: Black Americans were not born in chains. They were born in greatness. And until we honor that greatness, America will never be free. Trump steps back from the podium, the weight of his words still echoing in the silence. The crowd is stunned, some in awe, some in shock, some unwilling to believe. But all know they have witnessed something that cannot be forgotten. The ground under their memory has shifted, and the world feels different. For better or worse, they have been confronted not with a history lesson, but with a revelation. The hidden connection. Trump reveals the untold ties between Africa, America, and power elites. The room is charged, a current of anticipation humming through the air. Donald Trump grips the podium with both hands, his posture rigid, his voice sharpened into a weapon. And let me tell you something else, he begins, his tone rising with each syllable, cutting through the silence like a blade. It wasn't just about the past. It was about the connections, the ties that they didn't want you to know about. They made it sound simple. Africa there, America here, ships crossing the ocean. Nice, clean, and tragic. But it wasn't simple. It was deliberate. It was calculated. It was planned. And guess who was behind it? The elites, the so-called leaders, the ones who smile in your face while they steal behind your back, the ones who pretend they're saving you while they're really saving themselves. A ripple of unease spreads through the audience. Trump lets it linger, scanning the faces before him, pausing just long enough to let the words sink in. Then he leans forward, his voice dropping into something almost intimate, as though confessing a secret that had been carried for centuries. There were deals, there were understandings, there were handshakes across oceans. And it wasn't just about trade, it was about power. Always power. The elites in America, the elites in Europe, and yes, even some in Africa, they worked together. They shaped the story of Black Americans before a single soul set foot on these shores. They shaped it with whispers in candlelit rooms, with agreements sealed not in ink, but in blood. He steps back, lifts his chin, and raises his hand as if holding invisible strings. Do you understand what I'm saying? This wasn't history as an accident. This wasn't tragedy by chance. This was a stage play written and directed by a class of puppeteers who believed they alone could decide the fate of nations. And Black Americans? They were written into the script as proof, as instruments, as pawns in a game bigger than any of us were ever allowed to see. His voice grows thunderous, echoing like a preacher's call from a mountaintop. They told you it was random. They told you it was tragedy. But I am telling you it was strategy. These people didn't stumble into history. No, they carved it. They twisted it. They bent it until it served their purpose. And once they had carved it, once they had bent it, they taught it to you as if it were truth. They buried the secrets so deep that no textbook, no classroom, no news anchor would ever dare to mention it. Trump's hand slams down on the podium, and the sound ricochets across the hall. And you know what that means? It means the origins of Black Americans are not only about chains. They are about power stolen, alliances betrayed, and truths buried beneath the lies of powerful men. It means that history is not just about the past, it is about control of the future. His pace slows, and now he speaks with the cadence of philosophy rather than fury. America's foundation, my friends, is not separate from Africa. It is entangled. Entangled in ways they will never put in your textbooks, because to reveal it would mean admitting the truth, that the towers that scrape the skies of New York, the industries that fueled our rise, the cities that shine at night, they were not born out of purity. They were not born out of innocence. They were born out of entanglement, of wealth imported, extracted, stolen. And to admit that is to tear down the great myth of America's spotless beginning. The crowd gasps, some shaking their heads, others leaning forward with wide eyes, captured by the weight of the words. Trump shakes his own head solemnly, his expression grave, almost mournful. They told you America was free from the start. They told you it was a beacon, untouched, untainted. But the truth is harder. The truth is darker. The truth is that America's innocence was an illusion carefully crafted by those who profited from its opposite. And once you see that, once you open your eyes, you can never look at the flag, at the monuments, at the textbooks the same way again. He spreads his arms wide as though embracing both the horror and the revelation at once. They hid it, folks. They buried it deep, like treasure locked away in the ground. They thought no one would dig it up. No one would dare disturb the soil. But I'm here tonight to tell you it's all connected. It has always been connected. And until we face it, until we admit the ties, until we say it out loud, we will never break free from the lies that bind us. Trump's voice softens, nearly a whisper now, but every word rings like a bell. The past is not just the past. It is a chain, a shadow, a thread that winds through our present and our future. You cannot cut it by pretending it does not exist. You cannot bury it by pretending it never happened. The only way to break free is to face it, to name it, to confront the hidden connections that have bound us all along. He looks out at the crowd, his eyes blazing with conviction. And that, my friends, is the truth they fear most. That is the truth they have spent centuries trying to bury. Because once you know the connections, once you see the web, you cannot be controlled anymore. You cannot be lied to anymore. You cannot be told to sit down, to stay quiet, to forget. Trump takes a step back from the podium, his chest heaving, his voice trembling now with both anger and awe. It is all connected. Africa, America, Europe, power, wealth, betrayal. They told you it was tragedy. But I tell you it was strategy. And until we understand that, until we see it, we will never be free from the chains they've forged, not of iron, but of memory and deception. The hall is silent, heavy, electric. For a moment, it feels as though the entire audience is suspended between disbelief and awakening, caught in the tension between myth and revelation. Trump's words hang in the air like smoke, impossible to grasp, yet impossible to ignore. Whether they believe him or not, they feel the ground beneath them shift, the weight of history pressing down and pulling them into a truth darker, heavier, and more connected than they had ever imagined. The truth they tried to silence. Trump says Black Americans were more than just slaves. Trump pauses mid-stride, the rhythm of his pacing broken by something heavier, something almost sacred. The stage lights glow hot against his face, but his expression is shadowed, drawn tight with the weight of his next words. He grips the podium with both hands, leans into the microphone, and lets his voice fall to a near whisper that somehow carries louder than any shout. They wanted you to think Black Americans began in chains. That was the starting point, right? That's the first page in the book. But I'm telling you now, it's not true. They were more, so much more. They were builders, creators, warriors, thinkers, philosophers. They weren't just property. They weren't just slaves. They were people with legacies, and those legacies were stolen. The room tightens around him. The silence feels alive, pressing against every wall. His words hang in the air like smoke, impossible to catch, impossible to ignore. Trump is no longer pacing like a politician, making points. He is standing like a prophet delivering a warning. The tone is not argumentative, but elegiac, almost mournful. He speaks of a theft not only of freedom, but of identity, of a silencing so deep it echoes through centuries. They erase the music, he continues, his voice rising just slightly, the art, the sciences, the systems of government that these people carried within them. They stripped away the crowns and left only the chains. They replaced the memory of greatness with the weight of bondage. And they did it so Black Americans would never rise, so they would never believe they could rise. Because the greatest power you can steal from a man is not his labor, not his land, it's his memory. The crowd murmurs, some nodding slowly, others still in disbelief. Trump lifts his hand, his fingers stabbing at the air, as though accusing the very walls. And that's what they did. They stole the memory, they stole the origin. And when you steal the origin, you steal the future. You steal the possibility of pride, of strength, of destiny. You create a people who doubt themselves, a nation that doubts its foundation. That's the truth they wanted silenced. There is a rhythm to his words now, a cadence that feels both hypnotic and haunting. Each sentence lands like the toll of a bell, steady and undeniable. Trump, for all his brash reputation, suddenly takes on the tone of a philosopher king, lamenting not merely the cruelty of chains, but the cruelty of erasure. The truth they tried to silence, he says slowly, with the gravity of a final judgment, is this. Black Americans were never just slaves. They were never meant to be reduced to that one word. They carried greatness, and that greatness was feared. That's why they tried to bury it. That's why they still try to bury it today. He steps back from the podium for a moment, then forward again, his eyes scanning the room as though daring anyone to look away. Do you understand what that means? He asks, his voice sharp again, cutting through the silence. It means that the story you were told was not just incomplete, it was poisoned. It was designed not to teach, but to break. Because when you define a people by their chains, you ensure they can never walk freely, even when those chains are gone. The words turn philosophical again, swelling into a meditation on truth itself. A nation that builds its freedom on erasure, he declares, is a nation that carries a shadow on its soul. America constructed its monuments, its ideals, its shining promises, but beneath it all was silence. A silence about who helped build it, about what was stolen, about the greatness that was denied. That silence is the real chain. That silence is the real prison. Trump leans forward once more, his tone dropping low, almost conspiratorial. And here's the secret they don't want you to hear. If memory is stolen, it can also be restored. If greatness is buried, it can also rise again. But only if we name it, only if we face it, only if we refuse to let them keep us quiet. That is why they tried to silence this truth, because once you know it, once you speak it, you cannot be controlled anymore. The audience shifts, the tension unbearable. He has painted the loss of memory not as history, but as destiny, as the theft of an entire people's future. He straightens his back, his voice rising now with conviction, almost shaking with Orpheus' intensity of belief. The truth they tried to silence, he one thunders, is that Black Americans were heirs to kingdoms, to knowledge, to greatness, and those who feared that greatness worked tirelessly to bury it. But buried seeds grow, buried truths rise, and when they rise, they change everything. The hall is silent, but for the echo of his words. Some in the crowd bow their heads, as if in prayer. Others stare straight ahead, stunned, as though they have just witnessed not a speech, but a revelation. Trump stands still, his chest heaving, his eyes burning with something beyond politics. For a moment, he is not a man arguing over history, but a voice echoing through centuries, a voice that dares to speak the unspeakable. And then, softer now, almost like a benediction, he says, "They tried to silence it. They tried to bury it. But the truth is louder than silence, stronger than chains, greater than fear. And once spoken, it cannot be unsaid." The words fall heavy, irreversible. The audience, whether they believe or not, feels the ground beneath them shift. For in that moment, history is no longer just the past, it is a living force demanding to be heard. Trump's final bombshell: the future of America depends on knowing this hidden past. Trump's voice rises again, swelling like the sound of an organ in a cathedral, each word rolling over the audience with the gravity of prophecy. His pacing slows, deliberate now, like a preacher walking the last steps of a sermon before striking the final chord. The crowd leans forward, breathless, some with eyes wide in awe, others with faces tense in resistance, but all caught in the weight of the moment. "So here's the bombshell, folks," he declares, his voice cutting through the silence like a bell at midnight. "Listen carefully, because this is the part they're going to hate the most. The future of America. Our future depends on knowing this hidden past. You cannot build a nation on lies and expect it to stand. You cannot erase the origins of millions of your people and expect unity. You cannot silence history and expect freedom." The words vibrate in the air, charged, undeniable. He grips the podium as if anchoring himself to the truth he claims to reveal, his voice breaking with passion that blurs the line between anger and lament. If Black Americans don't know their true origins, if America itself refuses to face it, then we are doomed. Doomed to repeat the cycle, doomed to relive the same tragedies, doomed to circle back into division, over and over, century after century. History doesn't disappear when you bury it, it rots beneath the soil until it poisons the future. His words crash like waves against the audience, relentless, refusing to let them retreat into comfort. And then suddenly his tone softens, the sharp edges of anger tempered by the faintest flicker of hope. "But if we face it," he says slowly, deliberately, each word carrying the weight of 1,000 unspoken truths, "if we acknowledge it, then maybe, just maybe, we have a chance to build a country not on secrets, not on manipulation, but on truth, a chance to finally live up to the promise that has been written into our Declaration, shouted in our revolutions, and carved into our monuments. Because a nation built on lies may dazzle for a moment, but it cannot endure. A nation built on truth may struggle, may fight, may stumble, but it can rise. It can endure forever." The room is hushed now, heavy with the pressure of revelation. It is no longer the sound of a rally, It is the stillness of a courtroom where judgment is about to be passed. Trump's closing words thunder like prophecy, not policy, his voice echoing with something larger than politics. America cannot hide it forever, he proclaims. The truth always rises, always. You can bury it under lies, under textbooks, under speeches and propaganda. You can silence it for a generation, or two, or 10. But truth does not die. It waits. It waits for the moment to break free, to rise up like fire from the ashes. And the truth is this: Black Americans were not born in chains. They were born in greatness. And until we honor that greatness, America will never, never be free. He pauses, his chest heaving, the hall echoing with the ghost of his words. Remember that, he says, his voice dropping lower, softer now, almost pleading. Remember it tonight. Remember it tomorrow. Remember it forever. Because the destiny of this nation depends on it. The future of America depends not on what we pretend to be, but on what we are willing to face. And if we face it, if we dare to speak the truth they tried to silence, then perhaps the chains of memory can finally be broken. Perhaps the shadow that has haunted us can finally be lifted. Perhaps, for the first time, we can become what we were always meant to be. Trump steps back from the podium, his hands no longer clenched but open, as though releasing the truth into the room like a spirit that cannot be contained. The silence that follows is thunderous, heavier than applause, heavier than jeers. Some in the crowd sit frozen in disbelief, unwilling to accept the words they just heard. Others bow their heads, as if in prayer, as though something sacred has been spoken that cannot be undone. And still others rise to their feet, faces flushed, their eyes burning with a mixture of rage and revelation. For better or worse, all of them know they have heard something that will not leave them the same. The ground beneath them has shifted. The myths that cushion their understanding feel suddenly fragile, brittle under the weight of his words. Whether they believe or not, they feel the power of a truth framed as destiny, as prophecy, as the final judgment on a nation's soul. Trump stands there still, almost statuesque, his silhouette sharp against the lights. He is no longer pacing, no longer arguing, no longer persuading. He is pronouncing. He is sealing the speech like a verdict. And in that silence, America itself feels suspended between past and future, between denial and acknowledgement, between lies and truth. The crowd does not erupt in applause, not at first. There is no roar of triumph, no chant of slogans. Instead, there is a collective silence, a silence that feels like awe or dread, or both. A silence that tells everyone, that something has landed, something has broken open, something has been said that cannot be unsaid. And as he turns from the podium, the weight of his words lingers like smoke in the air. His final bombshell is not just a statement, but a warning, not just a revelation, but a demand. For the message is clear. The future of America depends not on forgetting, but on remembering, not on burying the past, but on unearthing it, not on lies, but on truth. Whether the nation can bear that truth, whether it can survive it, is left hanging in the silence that follows.